Aloha mai kako. This is Mrs. Terrell, and today we're going to start discussing the interview process. During and after the interview. So here's one of the interview stages that we're going to be talking about is the pre-visit. Remember, when you're going for that interview, you must remember that you're also interviewing the company that you're interested working at. And then one of the reasons why is after you visit them, it might be not a place that you want to work at. Second, there's the greeting where you introduce yourself. You just do a little bit of small talk. What I advise you to do is let the interviewer lead the discussion. Then there'll be the presentation of the company and the position. They'll talk a little bit about their company and then the position that you're interviewing for. Listen for that because, again, remember, you're interviewing the company too. Then they'll do what's called a resume review. It takes them about 2 minutes. What they do is they skim and scan for keywords to see if you're suitable for the position. And remember, you are suitable because you've already passed the first stage. After that, there'll be questions, and that's when you'll be able to provide them answers. And then you will be able to ask them any questions and listen to their answers. And then there'll be a closing. Remember, at the end of the interview, always remember to thank them for interviewing you and taking the time. Here's some characteristics of an outstanding interviewee. Smile, good humor. It's not cracking jokes. It's just being uplifting. A businesslike and professional attitude. Remember, first impressions are always important. So come dressed professionally. Look eager and enthusiastic. Don't overexert yourself. Be your natural self. And again, think about excellent appearance. Look at the workplace, and then you'll see, and during your pre-visit, how everyone else is dressed. Be well-spoken and articulate. In other words, speak clearly, concisely, and don't ramble on. And we're going to talk about all of those during our interview questions and answer process. Be relaxed and poised demeanor, and then be confident. What you should do prior to going into the interview is take a deep breath. One of the things that I do when they're asking a question and I get stumbled on, I take a deep breath and I say, that's a great question. Let me think about it. Be polite and have the ability to develop a rapport. In other words, listen to what the interviewer is asking and then respond to the question. Sometimes it helps if you restate the question. Maintain good eye contact, be attentive, and have good listening skills. So sometimes if you have trouble maintaining eye contact, look at either their nose or right above their forehead. But don't stare them down. So during the interview process, there's some unlawful interview questions that they can ask you. So in other words, if they ask you, can you tell me how old you are? Or they ask you, are you of Native Hawaiian descent? Or they ask about your religion, or if you're married and who lives with you, or whether you have children or not. They're not allowed to ask those questions because those things are personal. So it's against the law for them to ask you those questions. However, if you initiate that at the beginning or anytime during the interview process, then that gives them the opportunity to ask more questions. For example, if they ask you, tell me something about yourself, and you say, hi, I'm Mrs. Terrell, I'm 45 years old, I'm married, I have 3 children, all under the age of 4, that's giving them too much information that they'll be able to pursue. So during the interview, please keep out your personal information. If they ask you those questions, you could respond with, is that a question or a requirement of the job position? That way they can say, oh no. And then one of the hard things about Kauai or Hawaii in general is everybody knows everybody. So the less personal information, the better. So again, you're not required to answer these types of questions unless it relates to a bona fide occupation qualification, which are very few, unless you're serving alcohol, that you have to have a certain age. At the end of the interview, there's questions for you that you should be able to ask. At the end, the interviewer will say, "Do you have any questions for me?" You should always ask a question. One of the reasons why is there's no way that they would have answered all of your questions. So come prepared. So for example, if I'm hired, will there be a formal training program or on-the-job training? What are the expectations of a new employee? Is there a probationary period? How long is it? How is an employee evaluated and promoted? If I'm hired, who will be my immediate supervisor? Can you tell me about his or her management style? That number 5 is kind of a hard question to ask because that's putting the manager on the spot or the interviewer on the spot. So be careful if you're going to ask that question because they might not really know the management style of your supervisor. You can ask, what are the opportunities for personal growth in your company? Describe a typical assignment I might have. The reason why that's a good question is after listening to it, if that's not something that you feel you're well suited for or that your skills match, that should be a decision that you make whether you are going to seek employment with that company. The same with number 8. What will I be doing on a daily basis? What is an average day like for someone in this position? How much travel is normally expected with this position? That would be a question that if you're a manager or you're going to be a supervisor and the company has additional locations, so that's something that you might want to ask. And then what characteristics does a successful person in your have in your company? That's also great because again, you'll be listening to what they're saying and seeing if you're a match for that. Also, most of the employment opportunities, they have what's called pre-screening, or there's types of tests that they're going to give you. So similar to the personality test, Myers-Briggs, that we gave you, they have various different types of personality tests that pre-screens people. So if you ever have to do that test and you don't get a call after, it's probably because of that personality test. There's also what's called aptitude test. A lot of the military do that. And what the aptitude test talks about is what's your best fit or what careers is suitable for you. Also, there's technical. So for example, if you say you do 100 words per minute, or you can do Excel or certain databases, what they will ask you to do is perform a technical test. And if you're clerical, be careful because they will look at that. The last thing to remember is that 95% of the businesses and companies here drug test. So just a word of advice, if you are doing drugs, don't do it. Because I have personally interviewed people and they were excellent candidates and I sent them to a drug test and received a positive for drugs and not even hired them because we don't have to. So if a place of business says, we're going to send you to a drug test, almost 99% you will have gotten the job unless you're doing drugs. So if you're doing that, I would suggest that you stop doing it now. Here's the other thing, another tip. Know your market value first. So research jobs in your area and then think about how much, once they offer you the job, Determine what's the lowest salary requirement that you will accept. So for example, for myself, I'm a teacher and I also do consulting work and I do workshops. So for me, the lowest salary requirement that I have is ranges between $30 to $45 an hour. If they offer below that, I won't even consider it because as I said, remember, you're also interviewing them. Okay. Later on, you're going to be watching some videos that I think is very helpful. And these are some of the statements that they're going to be saying during the videos. Is what we speak the truth? So during your proof stories, and we're going to talk about that later, this is your experience, so it must be the truth. In other words, don't make it up. Is it necessary? Is that part of your answer really necessary? Think about it. That's why we're going to come prepared. Does it improve upon the silence? Don't be afraid to sit in silence because the interviewer could be thinking about other questions or thinking about what you said. So wait for the interviewer to ask for more information. So if you give a statement or an answer, just pause and wait for them to give you the next cue. The other thing will help you, if you get stuck on an answer, rephrase the question. It gives you time to think about your answer. You could say, a difficult time that I had to overcome is when I, and then you can go into your proof stories. I'm different. Belonging takes work. One of the things that you're doing all your life is you're trying to fit in. When you're applying for a job, you want to be different. You want to stand out among the other candidates because you know why? It's an advantage. You don't want to be like every other candidate. After the interview, you want them to remember you. And of course, there's differences that really, excuse the word, suck, but don't let them define you. And the last one is what makes me different has made me stand out and be successful. So we always want to highlight our strengths. Always consider your Myers-Briggs, then you can build on that. All right, so that's the end of this section. And I look forward to meeting with you and reviewing the rest of your videos and your forums. Okay, aloha.